Hello everybody, this is Johns Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and we're back with another of our 5-Minute Histories videos. And today I'm on Sheldon Avenue in the Bel Air Edison neighborhood, just off of Bel Air Road, or Blair Road if you're an old-time Baltimorean. And today we're going to talk about the Puerto Rico Home Museum, which is behind me. It's a museum about a year old that helps tell the story of Puerto Rican Baltimoreans, their culture and their heritage. I'm even more thrilled that we're going to go inside in just a minute and talk with its founder, Cristina Delgado. But before we go in, let me just say a word or two about Bel Air Edison, and then just a quick word about some of Baltimore's Latino communities. Let's start with Bel Air Edison. It got its start in Baltimore County around the middle of the 1800s, a little before the Civil War. And old-timers, even old-timers here today, know its nickname as Georgetown. That's not because it resembles Georgetown, Washington, D.C., but because a number of its prominent early residents were named George. There was George Bream, a brewer here. If you know Bream's Lane, that's our George. There was George Schwartz from a prominent farming family. There was George Lamley, another prominent farmer, who in 1883, we know through the records, grew a pumpkin that was 5.5 feet in diameter and weighed almost 100 pounds, so a pretty good pumpkin farmer. There was George Erdman, whose family had a number of farms and greenhouses here. Erdman Avenue, if you know that, that's that George. And George Graver, who was a prominent blacksmith in the community. If those names sound like European names and maybe German names mostly, they are. And maybe George Bream typifies the German immigrant here in early Bel Air Edison. Maybe most strikingly, his family came from prominent brewers in Adelsberg, Bavaria in Germany. They moved here just before the Civil War, and he started working for a brewery here called Niesendorfer's. Niesendorfer, his boss, eventually ended up dying. He ended up marrying the widow. Then he ended up taking over the brewery. Then he ended up changing the name of the brewery to, you guessed it, Bream's Brewery. Its most prominent beer was called One Grade Only. If you walked into a tavern here and just said OGO to the bartender, he'd know exactly what you were talking about. Bream, incidentally, died in 1904. Bream, like many Baltimoreans, stood day and night out in those cold February days and nights watching the great 1904 fire, and he did not recover from the exposure he had there. The brewery survived his death and survived the prohibition by brewing near beer, but didn't survive very much longer after that and folded in the 1930s. A big change came to Bel Air Edison in 1888 when the lower part of this area was annexed into Baltimore City. But a bigger change came in 1918 when the rest of it was annexed into the city. And that's when a building boom began. To give some indication of it, in 1919, so just at the time of annexation, there were 102 dwellings here. By 20 years later, in 1940, there were 1,700, many with wonderful French doors and front porches like the one behind me. By 1950, the neighborhood was pretty much built out. There were no more lots to build on, including the house behind me was built by then, which we're going to go into in 1 minute. But let me just say a word about Baltimore's Latino community. The first Latinos started arriving really in bigger numbers in the 1960s from Central America and from Cuba, fleeing Fidel Castro, and mostly from Puerto Rico. So Puerto Ricans have been at the early wave of Baltimore's Latino communities. The Baltimore Banner did a wonderful article not too long ago and pointed out that people who call Puerto Rico as part of their lineage number almost 3,000 today in Baltimore. There are hubs of Latino communities in Upper Fells Point, in Greektown, in Highlandtown. We got our first Latino Community Association in 1994, the Centro de la Comunidad, excuse me, my pronunciation is terrible. And today, annually, there's a Latino festival in Patterson Park. And as of about a year ago, we have a Puerto Rico Home Museum here in Bel Air Edison. And we're going to go inside right now and talk to Cristina Delgado.
So my name is Cristina Delgado. I'm an artist, an organizer, and educator. So this is Tola's room. It's a collective space. It is a Puerto Rican home museum and culture space in Northeast Baltimore, Bel Air Edison. It's named after my daughter, Omatola, who is Afro-Latina. She's Nigerian and Puerto Rican. When I purchased this home over 16 years ago, I always knew, because it had a lot of space, that I wanted something collective or creative to happen here. Just didn't really know what it was going to be. So when I started doing this, I just wanted to have a conversation with a friend of mine that I knew. She was born and raised here and she was Puerto Rican. But as I interviewed her and had this conversation, I realized that Puerto Ricans were a very prominent population here in Baltimore. And so that just really had me questioning, like, what happened to them? And then when I lost my dad suddenly about 10 years ago, it just prompted a new or a renewed sense of self, culture, identity. And being here in Baltimore, realizing and just kind of accepting it, but now realizing that there wasn't anything that represented me as a Puerto Rican even from New York, here in this space. I said, well, I wanted to just do, as an art therapy project, just share my culture with folks, and having people come into the space, realizing that many Puerto Ricans that live here, the diaspora that's here in Baltimore, have the same sentiments and feelings that I do. And so now it's evolved and grown into this project. So the space that we're in now, this room is dedicated to Baltimore and Puerto Rico, around organizing, around advocacy. And so the pictures behind me are my photographs that I've taken in Baltimore throughout the years. The historic things, the death certificates, the birth certificates, the photographs, the albums, the vinyls, though I have a few. A lot of the things are from my dad, and that's kind of how it started. And so I wanted to dig a little bit deeper, but realized even to learn more of the history here, I would have to have like first and last names. I would also have to have street names. So I have this Google form that I put out, just really with a few questions, just kind of asking folks like, you know, are they living here? How long have they been here? But really trying to get a sense of what happened, or like what people's sentiments and feelings are about being Puerto Rican in Baltimore. The hope, though, is that once we get these newer stories, that people might want to donate stuff to the space, and we can find ways to bring that in to tell a larger story about the Puerto Rican history. If you're interested in what we're doing, definitely Instagram is a great means to reach us. So it's just Tola's, so it's Tola's Room, but there's an underscore in between. So it's Tola's _room. But then on that page, you can get on to our link tree, which will lead you to the history of the things that we've done, but also the Google form and any events that we have coming up. So we are doing a women's circle event in March. And then we're also doing a backyard party sale. It's called the Backyard Party, but the idea is that we're going to be selling things to clear out our basement space to make shelving. So we're going to be doing that in June. And then the Be More Boricuas project will be happening over the summer into October for a Hispanic Heritage Month.